How far will your faith in God last before you give up and follow the crowd? Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Welcome to another week of Torah studies. This week we are in Numbers 13 through 15 and Joshua chapter 2. This whole section, just these 3 chapters, could take several weeks to just go through and apply many of the events here in our modern day lives and have quite a discussion as to who was right and who was wrong. But ultimately, we're going to find out that following God was rewarded, but not for some time. Chapter 13 starts, Adonai said to Moses, send on your behalf to reconnoiter or spy out the land of Canaan, which I am giving to the people of Israel. From each ancestral tribe send someone who is a leader of his tribe. Moses dispatched them from Paran desert as Adonai had ordered. And then it lists all the different leaders of the different tribes. And interestingly, they're about to discover exactly what God had promised, that the land is full of milk and honey, as they say. And also that was in there, Moses renamed Hosea to Joshua. And Joshua is going to become a very key figure in the coming chapters. Moses sent them to spy out the land of Canaan, instructing them, go up on to the Negev into the hills and see what the land is like. Notice the people living there, whether they are strong or weak, few or many, what kind of country they live in, whether it is good or bad, what kind of cities they live in, open or fortified. See whether the land is fertile or unproductive, whether there is wood or in it or not. Finally, be bold enough to bring back some of the fruit of the land. When they left, it was the season of the first grapes to ripen. Verse 21, they went up and spied the land from the Zin desert to Rechob, near the entrance of Hamat. They went up to the Negev and around it to Hebron, Achamin, Sheshai, Talmi, Anakim, and lived there. So the Anakim were giants. So they saw all of this. Hebron was built 7 years before Zolan in Egypt. Just as a little side note. They came to the Eshcol Valley. They cut off a branch bearing one cluster of grapes, which they had to carry on a pole between two of them. They also took pomegranates and figs. That place was called the Valley of Eshcol, or cluster, because the cluster which the people of Israel cut down from there. 40 days later, this is verse 25, they returned from spying the land and went to Moses, Aaron, and the entire community of the people of Israel at Kadesh in the Paran desert, where they brought back word to them, and the entire community showed them the fruit of the land. What they told him was this: we entered the land where you have sent us. It indeed flows with milk and honey. Here is its fruits. However, the people of the land are fierce, and the cities are fortified with very large. Moreover, they are the Anakim that live there. Amalek lives in the area of the Negev. The Hittite and the Yushvi and the Amori live in the hills. The Canaani live by the sea along with the Jordan. Caleb silenced the crowd. So Caleb silenced the crowd around Moses and said, we ought to go up immediately and take possession of it. There is no question that we can conquer it. But the men who had gone with him said, we can't attack those people because they are much stronger than we, and spread out a negative report about the land that they had spied for the people of Israel by saying, the land we have passed through in order to spy out this land that devours inhabitants, all the people we saw there are giant. We saw the Nephilim, the descendants of Anak, who from the Nephilim to ourselves looked like grasshoppers by comparison. We looked that way to them too. So here we go. Moses was instructed to send 12 people to go spy out the land of Canaan, which they were promised by God, and they obviously saw exactly what God had promised. but at the same time, they saw what they were fearful of. Now, 10 of them came back with a bad report, and 2 of them, Joshua and Caleb, were ready to go. Let's go fight right now. Let's trust God and just move forward. But the 10, so the group, the larger part of the group, was able to manipulate the rest of the nation of Israel, and that spread very quickly. That fear raced through the nation in a very fast manner. We're going to see how God dealt with that. But the point is fear can create all kinds of bad news, bad reports, bad ways that we get so afraid of even living day to day based on the fact that enough people are convinced that what is about to take place will take place, and they are able to manipulate the rest of the masses. And you can easily look at the current coronavirus situation. We're not going to go deep into that, but we got masks, 6 foot distance in terms of where we're supposed to be. Now there's a vaccine out, and which has not been proven. It's just something that has been accepted by society that's necessary for, quite frankly, a virus that is it's strong, don't get me wrong, but it's curable. You can go through it, which I did. And a vaccine isn't necessary. But I am not here to determine that for you. That's something you'll have to decide for yourself. All that to say is a massive amount of people were afraid during the coronavirus, and it caused lots of division among people throughout the world, and it's still going on at this moment. And I don't think the conclusion to that is going to be anytime soon. We have in the United States, some places are still locked down. I live in one of those states. And then there's other states that are open and free and continuing life as if that virus never happened. And so all that to say is this all started by manipulating the mass amount of people. If you just move that to the book of Revelations, there's a few very clear similarities that need to be considered. In Revelation, that talks about the plagues that are the bulls, the 7 bulls that the angels bring upon the earth. One of the bulls is a plague that wipes out 1/3 of the world. Now, it doesn't say how that's going to take place. It's metaphorically stating that a bull is being dumped out. And so one talks about destroying the water supply. Another talks about vegetation and so forth. But one of the bulls talks about a plague that wipes out 1/3. If you count up the estimated number of people that are going to take the vaccine by the people that are on the planet, it'll be 1/3. Now, does that mean that that's a way of eliminating 1/3 of the people? I don't think so. I think we're being blessed by seeing how easy it is to manipulate the world. It's when 9/11 started, we now go to the airport and we have to take off our shoes, and we can't carry certain things through the checkout, and all types of things that were created from that. And we innocently went along with what we thought was correct. Now, whether that was fabricated to begin with because the government wanted stricter controls on people, that's still yet to be seen. However, at the same time, though, you have to wonder, if they were able to start getting us to do certain things based on fear as our behavior pattern, then it's easy to see that they don't need as big a event to cause such a chaos in the world. And so here we go. This is 10 people in a very short time infected the entire nation of Israel. 2 are standing by God, saying, no, God promised this. I trust God. Let's go. And the remainder were so convinced that that God had brought them there to be destroyed. They, in fact, are going to find out what that meant from God. Chapter 14 goes, at this All the people of Israel cried out in dismay and wept all night long. Moreover, all the people of Israel began grumbling against Moses and Aaron. The whole community told them, "We wish we had died in the land of Egypt, or that we had died here in the desert. Why is Adonai bringing us to this land, where we will die by the sword? Our wives and our little ones will be taken as booty. Wouldn't it be better for us to return to Egypt?" And that they said to each other, "Let's appoint a leader and return to Egypt." Moses and Aaron fell on their faces before the entire assembled community of the people of Israel. Joshua the son of Nun and Caleb the son of Jephunneh, from the detachment that had spied out the land, tore their clothes and said to the whole community of Israel, "The land we passed through in order to spy it out, outstandingly good land. If Adonai is pleased with us, then he will bring us into the land, give it to us, a land flowing with milk and honey. Just don't rebel against Adonai, and don't be afraid of the people living in the land. We'll eat them up. Their defense has been taken down, and Adonai is with us. Don't be afraid of them." It continues, but just as the whole community were saying they should be stoned to death, the glory of Adonai appeared in the tent of meeting for all the people of Israel. Adonai said to Moses, "How much longer is this people going to treat me with contempt? How much longer will they not trust me, especially considering all the signs I have performed among them? I'm going to strike them with a sickness, destroy them and make you a nation greater and stronger than they are." However, Moses replied to Adonai, "When the Egyptians hear about this, because it was from among them that you by your strength brought this people up, they will tell the people living in this land, they have heard that you, Adonai, are with this people, that you, Adonai, are seen face to face, that your cloud stands over them, that you go ahead of them in a column of cloud by day, a column of fire by night. If you kill off this people in a single stroke, then the nations that heard of your reputation will say that the reason Adonai slaughtered his people in the desert is that he wasn't able to bring them into the land which he swore to give them. So now please, Adonai, power be as great as when you said, 'Adonai is slow to anger, rich in grace, forgiving sins and crimes, yet not exonerating the guilty, but causing the negative effects of their parents' offenses to be experienced by their children, even to the third and fourth generations. Please forgive the offense of the people according to the greatness of your grace, just as you have borne with the people from Egypt until now.'" Adonai obviously had gone to the point of being done. It goes on to talk about this was the 10th time that the nation had tested God while they had left Egypt. All I'm trying to say is how I have placed myself in this position a few times. I don't want bad things to happen to myself. I know no one does. However, just simply, I had cancer, and instead of running to God, maybe to understand what was going on, but also at the same time to get comfort from God, I ran to the doctors, I ran to the internet, I looked for ways to find a cure for what I just had discovered I had in my body. I was unaware of the Bible in the sense of the healing that God has for us through his son Jesus. I knew of the gospel, but I didn't know in Isaiah 53:5 that he was beaten for our transgressions, bruised for our iniquities, and by his stripes we are healed. That was a prophecy of Isaiah that was fulfilled when Jesus died on the cross. And we know about salvation, but oftentimes we're not told about the other things that Jesus did for us when he had passed on. The Apostle Peter in his epistle said the same exact words in as a prophecy fulfilled. And so all that to say is I'm trying to figure out whether I would have been with Caleb and Joshua, or I would have been on the side of the tent. In almost every situation that I've faced, I I am not the best when it comes to faith. And I confess to you now that it's not easy when you're faced with something that you just weren't prepared for. I mean, no one's prepared for, cancer. No one's prepared for a car accident. No one's prepared for just things that happen on, living this life here on earth. And people with strong faith, I commend them. I think it's fantastic that they're able to just turn and face God. Job was one of those people. That's why he's considered one of the greatest uh, people that ever lived. I mean, even God calls him out to as an example that even if Job, Daniel, and Moses were standing before God at one point in time with the Israelites, he wouldn't listen to them because they had gone that far with their sins against him. So all that to say is here's Moses pleading with God not to wipe out the people. They both, him and Aaron and Caleb and Joshua, all knew that the people had made a mistake, but he didn't want the consequence to be death right then and there, and with all the people. And so uh, it's called intercessory prayer. And so, that's just praying for somebody on their behalf. And, when someone asks for prayer, you're asking for intercessory prayer, whatever the case might be, you know. And so, if you, here's where the rubber meets the road with people, though. If you say you're going to pray for somebody, do you actually pray for them? And so in this case, this was right before the people, and it's recorded. It's a great prayer of not only reminding God of what Moses was promised, but also reminding God of why he brought the people out in the first place. And it's not that God doesn't know that is going to come out of Moses' mouth or what is going to happen, but he needs to draw that out sometimes to show other people the faith of that person and what they're willing to do for that. And so in this case, Moses was putting himself in the place of the people and basically, strike me dead, but let them live. And so Adonai answered, in verse 20, it says, I have forgiven as you have asked. But sure as I live, and the whole earth is filled with the glory of Adonai, none of the people who saw my glory and signs I did in Egypt and in the desert, yet tested me these 10 times and did not listen to my voice, will see the land I swore to their ancestors. None of those who treated me with contempt will see it, but my servant Caleb, because he had a different spirit with him and was fully following me. Him I will bring into the land he entered along. It will belong to him and his descendants. Now, since the Amalekite and the Canaanite are living in the valley, tomorrow turn around and get yourselves into the desert along the way of the Sea of Surf. So here's the Lord's answer to Moses. Caleb's going to be preserved, and so is Joshua, even though it's not mentioned in that sentence. And fantastic for Caleb in terms of his faith it didn't waver, and even God called that out. He has fully followed me, which means on other times, that the people were testing God, Caleb remained steadfast, and I think that's based on the fact that him stating that right there, that he fully followed him. And so God, okay, we're not going to go to the promised land as I had promised you, but here's what's going to happen. You're going to turn around and go elsewhere. But just like typical human beings, when we discovered the error of our ways, we want to make it right. We want to, okay, I made a mistake. I'm going to go ahead and just do it anyway. And in this case, this is going to cost even more people their lives. And so verse 26 says, Adonai said to Moses and Aaron, how long will I put up with this evil community who keeps grumbling about me? I have heard these complaints of the people of Israel, which they continue to raise against me. Tell them this, as surely as I live, Adonai swears, as surely as you have spoken in my ears, I will do this to you. Your carcasses will fall in the desert, every single one of you, included in the census over the age of 20. you have complained against me, will certainly not enter the land about which I raised my hand to swear that I would have you live in it, except for Caleb the son of Jephunneh and Joshua the son of Nun. But your little ones, who you said would be taken as booty, them I will bring in. They will know the land you have rejected, but your carcasses will fall in the desert, and your children will wander about in the desert for 40 years, bearing the consequences of your prostitutions until the desert eats you up and your carcasses. For every day you spent spying the land, you will bear the consequences of your offenses. 40 days, 40 years. Then you will know what it means to oppose me. I, Adonai, have spoken. I will certainly do this whole evil community who is assembled together against me. They will be destroyed in the desert and die there. So God's punishment was, okay, I'm not going to wipe them out, but I'm going to wipe out the group of people that got to see all these miracles and see all the things that God had done. He's now going to deal with them. And sadly for Caleb and Joshua and Moses and Aaron, they got to see a lot of funerals throughout their lifetime. So for 40 years, they're going to wander the desert as people are passing away. And till the next generation basically comes to fruition. So, you know, you wonder, okay, if you're 19, did you skip that one or whatever? But it really doesn't matter. There's going to be several people dying. And unfortunately, the people that were given the promise, that trusted God from Egypt, have now just have spent their last nickel, so to speak, and God is going to deal with them. Then the men who Moses sent out to spy the land, and who, when they returned, made the entire community complain against him by giving an unfavorable report about the land, those men who gave the unfavorable report about the land died by a plague in the presence of Adonai. Of the men that went to spy the land, only Joshua the son of Nun and Caleb the son of Jephunneh remained alive. When Moses told these things to all the people of Israel, the people felt great remorse. They also rose early the next morning and came up to the top of the mountain and said, "Here we are, and we did sin, but now we'll go up to the place Adonai promised." Moses answered, "Why are you opposing what the Lord said? You won't succeed. Don't go up there, because Adonai isn't with you. If you do, your enemies will defeat you. The Malachim and the Canaanite are there ahead of you, and you will be struck down by the sword. The reason be that you turned away from following Adonai, so that Adonai won't be with you." But they were presumptuous and went up toward the high parts of the hill country, even though the Ark of Covenant remained with Moses, stayed in the camp. So the Amalekites and the Canaanites, living in the hill country, descended, struck them down, beat them back all the way to Hormah. God said don't, and they still went anyway, because they wanted to try to make up for the mistake that they made, that they knew they had made. And so, again, you know, following God in the first place would have preserved more than just Caleb and Joshua, and they could have entered into the promised land. And it's easy to point fingers and say, oh yeah, I wouldn't have done that. But, truthfully, put yourself in that situation and really decide, would you have or not? And so chapter 15 is talking about a free will offering to God. So you feel like you've been blessed and you want to thank God for that. So you bring a free will offering, and explains how to do that. And it's also, just wants to remind the nation in chapter 15, verse 13, it says, every citizen is to do these things the way presenting an offering made by fire as a fragrant aroma to Adonai. So you got to follow the rules. If you're going to do something for God, do as He is asking you to do. And He reminds, if the foreigner stays with you, and whoever may be with you through all the generation, he wants to bring an offering made by fire, a fragrant aroma for Adonai, he is to do the same as you. For this community, there will be the same law for you as the foreigner living with you. This is a permanent regulation through all your generations. The foreigner is treated the same way before Adonai as yourselves. The same Torah and the standard of judgment will apply to both of you and the foreigner living with you. And so, fantastic promise to us that aren't Israelites, Hebrew, but at the same time, you're required, if you're going to follow the Lord, to follow it the way He asked you to do that. So that's the both sides of that. But He's saying the Torah doesn't apply differently for different people, right there in that statement. That should clear up a lot of confusion with people. If you choose to follow the Lord and you want to follow the Torah the way God had presented it. And so, just to summarize the rest of chapter 15, it says, "Speak to the people of Israel, tell them, when you enter the land I am bringing you, eat bread produced in the land. You are to set aside a portion as a gift for Adonai." So he's going back, God is going back to the future again, so to speak, for this people, as he's not giving up on them completely, but he's already told the group that those are going to die, but this is for the next group that's coming up, that they're going to follow the plan that God had promised them. Plus, they're gonna give back to God a gift offering of thankfulness, and then it goes on to talk about if you find out that you made a mistake and didn't know it, that you sinned. The high priest will do a offering for the entire nation, and normally that's done on Yom Kippur. But they can do it at any time if they find out the whole community made a mistake. And then if you yourself found out that you made a mistake and sinned against somebody, then you are to once you're made aware of that, then you need to make right on that sin, which is great. There's times you've done something, you don't even realize it was wrong, but then when you discover it's wrong, you're to make atonement for that. You're supposed to, acknowledge the fact that you did it, and now, okay, let's move on. Get your forgiveness and move on. But if you do it directly, the consequence is bad. So if an individual, this is verse 30, who does something wrong intentionally, whether a citizen or a foreigner, is blasphemy Adonai, that person will be cut off from his community, because he has had contempt for the word of Adonai and disobeyed his commands. That person will be cut off completely. His offense will remain with him. That doesn't mean necessarily they're dead. They don't die that immediately, but they're no longer part of that community. And so, that's intentionally killing somebody, intentionally stealing, intentionally everything against God. That could get you cut off from the community. And so, all that to say is, God setting down the plan. He needs to continue to remind them what the law says and how they're to respond. But now you're going to have a nation that's basically all of the elders are being they're going to die, and so the people are going to have to really relearn the Torah, and that's part of Deuteronomy, is to re-explain to this nation of younger people what the laws are. And so before Moses leaves the scene, we're going to have him show what that's like. And so the people that are young here don't know. They're going to be retrained, so to speak. And so it goes on to explain that verse 32 says, "While the people of Israel were in the desert, they found a man gathering wood on the Shabbat. Those that found him brought him to Moses, Aaron, and the whole congregation. They kept him in custody because they had not yet decided what to do. Then Adonai said to Moses, this man must be put to death. The entire community is to stone him outside the camp." So the whole community brought him outside the camp, threw stones at him, and he died, as Adonai had ordered Moses. Adonai said to Moses, "Speak to the people of Israel, instructing them to make, through all their generations, tzitzit on the corner of the blue thread. Tzitzits are for you to look at, and thereby remember Adonai's law and obey them. So you won't go around wherever your own heart and eyes lead you to prostitute yourselves. But it will help you remember all your mitzvot laws and be holy before God. I am Adonai your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt in order to be your God. I am Adonai your God." And so I do want to explain that the tzitzits are the same thing. The woman who had her flow of blood that had gone on for several years, and that she reached up and grabbed Jesus by the garment. That's where she was. It says that she was grabbing, and power went out through that to her and healed her. All that to say is that they're the little tassels that fall from the prayer shawl that someone was wearing, and somewhere just those around their belt. There's but they're little tassels of blue and white, and it just to remind you of the Ten Commandments and God's laws. We're going to move to chapter 2 of Joshua and finish up today's lesson. So the book of Joshua is considered a great account of God working through the Jewish people, the Israelites, in what he wanted to do back when Moses was ready to enter the land. So Joshua took over for Moses as leader of the group, and he learned some lessons that Moses had not, in terms of how many people to trust to go and spy out the land. But what's interesting in this chapter 2 is Joshua sends 2 people. They end up spending the night at Rahab's home, who was considered a prostitute in Jericho. And she's basically says that they were there, but they left, and kind of diverts the people of Jericho from trying to get to the Israelites. And all that to say is, Rahab's going to be rewarded for this when this event takes place. And so then she comes back to the men. The guys leave the area to go search out for these 2 guys, and when she returned to the roof, I think it's very interesting the conversation that takes place. And she said, verse 8 says, "I know that Adonai is giving you the land. Fear of you has fallen on us. Everyone in the land is terrified at the thought of you. We heard how Adonai dried up the water in the sea of surf ahead of you when you left Egypt, and what you did to the 2 kings of the Amori on the other side of the Jordan, Sihon and Og, that you completely destroyed them. As soon as we heard it, our hearts failed us. Because of you, everyone is in a state of depression. For Adonai your God, he is the God of heaven above and earth below. So please swear by me, by Adonai, that since I have been kind to you, you will also be kind to my father's family. Give me some evidence of your good faith, that you will spare the lives of my father, my mother, brothers and sisters, and all who are theirs, so we won't be killed." The men replied for her, "Our lives are certainly worth yours, provided you don't betray our mission. So when Adonai gives us the land, we will treat you kindly in good faith." As you can see, okay, so the Sihon and Og was done during Moses' time, in terms of them fighting Israel and watching them just completely destroy them. And so these people have been sitting and waiting. I mean, you imagine it's probably been 40 years, right, since they heard of this story. Obviously, it started before that when they left Egypt. They know that they were coming. They didn't know when, they didn't know how, but for 40 years, this has been, now that they're at their doorstep, they obviously know that their time is ending as a nation. Jericho knows that it's almost over, but they can't stand up to it. And so she's explaining that their hearts have melted. So in other words, God had already set the stage for the other group, and yet they didn't follow through. And if they had, this is what the nations that they were going to pursue and take over were going to experience. And just mentioning earlier the the lack of faith during some difficult times, you wonder if you had stayed faithful, what that would have looked like, right? I mean, you wonder if you would have, here's Caleb and Joshua, now they're going to enter into the promised land, and they've waited 40 years for this, for God's promise to come to pass. We get frustrated if it doesn't happen in 40 minutes. So, but here it's going to happen. But at the same time, just to hear what the people had to say in reference to what they believed was going to happen to them. And it's clearly stated Israel would have easily taken the land back in Moses' time. And the difference probably would have been that Joshua's time, he's obviously older at this point, they were unable to complete this complete takeover of the land of Canaan. And so part of Revelation's explaining that when Jesus comes, he's going to finish the job. Caleb's group of people, although they did well, they didn't complete the task. They just went to the point of just starting to inhabit with the land of the people instead of taking them out like they were told to do. And God wasn't talking about mass genocide to destroy all these people, but he was asking them to wipe them out in terms of taking back what was already theirs. That had been taken from them, and God was returning the nations back, or the nation of Canaan back to the Israelites. Now, some people don't like that, but that is, they had stolen the land, so God was asking them to take it back. He didn't need them to do this. Obviously, he could have just, moved them all out of the way, put Israel back in that spot, and wiped out all the people that he wanted wiped out. But these people had gone to the point of no longer acknowledging God as God. So this was a nation of people that had they were aware of it, just as Rahab is explaining here, but that didn't mean that they were worshiping God and trusting in him. Obviously, because it's mentioned, foreigners had come to the Israelites and wanted to be part of them. And so those people were giving up what they were familiar with to follow God. And so, and I've mentioned a few times, that was radical to have one God, not multiple gods, in this time that these folks are alive. And so to follow just one God and trust in that one God to beat out the nations that were stronger in appearance was something just not heard of. And so as we talked just a few minutes ago about a full-on nation had to be replaced, and now they're going to be going into the promised land. And so, but I just find that fascinating that this is what the belief that Joshua and Caleb already had, that God had already given up the land, or gotten the land already for them, and they just didn't seize the opportunity. And so, and this book of Joshua is a fantastic, excitement and just the different things that go on. But very, very easy read, and I think it's fascinating if you have the time to just read the whole book. You'll get a lot out of it. So, any rate, thank you so much. God bless and have a great day.